All right, it's time to get actually in the disc. So here's what we're going to look at first. Now, when we talk about disc, we're going to break it into 4 quadrants, right? But before we get into that, we want to talk about what we call our verticals, all right? So we have the up and down. At the top of this, we have what's called active people. People that are active really fall into the category of being more engaging on their own. They don't need to have someone engage them. They like to engage. And so when you start thinking about what you might be, think of it in a very comfortable setting. Now, in the last video, I talked about being at a conference or speaking at a conference, how different I can act in those situations. So what I want to think of is when I'm at home or when I'm with people that I know, right? When I'm feeling more relaxed. And don't even look at work. For some people, work is not relaxing. And so what you want to do is look at when you're comfortable, when you're what we call at rest, what do you tend to be? And so when we look at this, you may be active. Now, an active person, again, is somebody who is more of a teller. They want to tell you about their day. They want to, they're going to maybe have more fun or take the lead or kind of have new ideas. All these types of things are more active people. And so when we say someone is active, and you want to look and say, okay, am I active? Well, let me ask you, in your comfortable setting, do you wait for somebody to ask or inquire about what's going on with you, or are you eager to share about it? If you like sharing a little bit more than you someone needing someone to ask you. It's not even liking someone, you don't mind someone asking, but needing someone to ask you to do, about your day, then you probably tend to be more active. Now it's a spectrum, right? And you may be really close to what we call the midpoint, where you're not, maybe it's harder to tell. And that's okay too. And so an active person, again, is someone who is more of a teller. Well, then you have at the bottom, you have what's called reserved. Some people call this passive, but we talk about passive in our communication stuff, so we're going to say reserved here. Someone who is more reserved is just that. They sit back. They want to be asked questions. They may take the lead if asked, but they're not going to probably jump to taking the lead. In some situations, they'd be the best leaders because you want someone at times in a leadership role that is more introspective and is processing. And that's another way of saying it, is that they're more introspective. And so I want to encourage you to process. Do you think you are more active, or do you think you're more reserved? And that's kind of how you process information. Now, that's the vertical, okay? Active at the top, reserved at the bottom, just because they're at opposite ends, not because one's higher than the other. But then we have our horizontal. The horizontal is task on one side, and we have relationship on the other. Now, a task type person views success through the completion of tasks. And that may be, again, it's a spectrum. It may not be a large thing, or maybe you're more of a, what we call a type A personality, that it's all about the task, right? And I actually had someone in my life that I reported to indirectly for a while, and this person was very, very task oriented, and he was working with an executive coach, and they said, look, we want you to spend time talking to some of the people that work for you, like 5 minutes. So he would set his watch for a 5-minute increment countdown. As soon as it would go off, he would go to the next person, but he completed the task, right? And so he is very task, and you may be task. We joke at home that Abigail will make a list for her lists and which list she needs to make. And honestly, I'm glad she does, because when we go on vacation, she makes sure we have everything we need. And so task is viewing success through the completion of that task. So ask yourself, if there's first, do you make task lists in your head or on paper or on your computer? And second, if there's a task undone, does that drive you crazy? You probably would tend to be more task-oriented if that's the case. Well, then on the other side is relationship. A relationship-focused person doesn't mean they don't do tasks. In fact, we do tasks every day, right? Everybody does. But it's how they view success. Is it through the task being completed, or is it through the relationship being built. Now, these people can be really great in groups, especially if they're leading a group, right? Because it's about the relationship, it's about the engagement. It's how are you doing with this information? How do you feel? Are you moving forward? But there's a negative. They may be so focused on those relationships that they leave the task behind. If we say we're going to get through this material, they may say, well, let's just tangent over to here. And our task people are getting really frustrated. And so a relationship person is, in general, someone you want to talk to more than our task-oriented people. Not that we don't want to talk to task people, but relationship people, that's how they view success, is there's relationships being built. So we've got active and reserved. We've got task and we have relationship. Which do you think you fall into? Do you think you're more task or do you think you're more relationship? Do you value and see success through the completion of the task or the health of the relationship? Do you value being active and being more of a teller or being more of an asker in the reserved role? And we're going to break these down to the 4 quadrants. So if you're not sure yet, that's okay. And again, as we said in the other videos, you're probably not really just one thing. And that's okay too. So we're going to get into our first 2 categories in our next video, D and I. And we look forward to you really identifying who you are, but also identify some of the people in your immediate life, whether it be your boss or your spouse or your kids or your neighbor, family members, parents, but really want to encourage you to do that as well.